talking about type 1 versus type 2 decisions, something that I think can really serve, especially if you're like dragging your feet to make any type of decision in your business. Maybe it's new software, key hire, deciding if you should get new credit cards for your corporation, whatever it is. Literally, if you struggle with making faster decisions and you get anxiety from making the wrong decisions, I want to teach you a different way that really can unlock and open up the floodgates for not only you to feel more confident and comfortable making decisions, but more importantly, to allow your team to make decisions on your behalf, or at least know that you're moving things forward and you're not dragging your feet, or I like to say, driving with the handbrake on. Oftentimes, when people get anxious around making decisions, it's literally in your business like driving with the handbrake on. You know, you got it pulled up and you're hitting the gas, and at the same time, it's just like the back tires are just dragging on the pavement. You need to drop the handbrake and move things forward. So I want to share with you a framework called type 1 versus type 2 decisions. I first learned this from Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He's made the concept famous. The analogy is very simple. Imagine there are two types of decisions you can make in your life. There's one type, which is type 1, which is kind of like a one-way door, right? Kind of a door that opens, and once you step through the door, it closes. That's a type 1 decision. A type 2 decision is a decision more like a revolving door, where as you go through the revolving door, you can come back and work your way out of entering that building by staying in the door and moving backwards. And the reason why it's really important to create distinction amongst which one you're making a decision around is that things that are type 2 decision allow you to make a decision, and if it's wrong, you learn new information. You can always step back for it. Whereas a type 1 decision, something like buying a company or bringing on investors or deciding what bank you're going to go with, these are things that are kind of like one-way direction. Well, maybe not the bank one, but they're one-way decisions. And the risk in a business is that you use the thoughtfulness and the pace of a type 1 decision for things that are really type 2 decisions, things that you can easily work your way out of. You should never use the level of thought and rigor and assessment and information gathering as you would for a type 1 decision. So the key idea is to slow down, to make small decisions, but make the key ones. Jeff Bezos famously said that, in the morning when he wakes up, he only has to make one or two really good decisions to make his day really productive. And the reason, because of that, he usually front loads those decisions early in the morning when his cognitive abilities are really strong. So I want to walk you through some strategies to help you make better type 1 and type 2 decisions. First off is, I want you to understand that in every decision you make, there's a component of you that's making decisions out of fear based on past experience. And like most people, there's probably a good chance that you've had some challenges or trauma or issues come up in the past that are fogging your ability to make decisions today. Okay, so fear is actually an acronym, and it stands for false evidence appearing real. Okay, so fear is an acronym, and I want you to memorize this, for false evidence appearing real. The reason I share that is because most people can't make a decision based on, some people call it trauma, PTSD, whatever, on a scenario that happened in the past. But if you objectively look at the situation you're in today, there's no artifacts of that previous scenario represented in today's decision, and you're not making the decision out of a fear that's just not real. The people involved are different, the scenario's different, the person you are today, you've grown to become somebody that can deal with and handle issues. I mean, just ask yourself this question. If you make the decision and you move forward, instead of being fearful that it won't work out, ask yourself, what's the potential downside, and who have I become, and have I dealt with bigger challenges than the one that potentially could happen if this thing doesn't go in the right direction? The answer for a lot of people is yes. You 100% have dealt with situations today that even you don't even realize when you're dragging your feet to make a decision, your ability to deal with the challenge, it could, probably won't ever happen, Most people stress themselves out over scenario. The stress of the decision usually causes more pain than the potential of the thing not working out. That's crazy, but happens all the time, where there's more challenge and frustration and anxiety and emotions around making the decision than would have come from the thing that you decide to do not working out. You could have actually got through that easier than the anxiety you brought to yourself. This is the opportunity that I really want to shed some light on. So first off, again, I want to remind you, FEAR is an acronym, false evidence appearing real. So you just have to audit yourself and really write down, like, is this even true? Is there any component of this, belief system that I've got right now that's even true around, moving this forward and what could go wrong? So that's number one. Second is, always look at the upside and the downside in making a decision. The way I think about it is, doesn't matter if it's an angel investment. I've invested in 40 plus companies as an angel investor, buying companies. I've done a lot of that lately. Key hires. I think I've hired about 15 people in the last 4 months. So like making decisions around hiring. So the moving forward upside versus the downside. If the upside is disproportionate to the potential downside, meaning that worst case scenario, if for example, you hire somebody and in 2 months they don't work out. Yeah, I got to go through the process of recruiting somebody new and I got to cross train them. But the downside of that is manageable. And the upside of hiring somebody amazing that just takes things off your plate, that creates a ton of value for your business, is so high that for me in that situation, the downside risk is worth the upside reward. What most people never analyze is, can they live with the downside? So let's say you've saved a couple $100,000 and somebody comes to you and says, hey, you should invest in Bitcoin, and you know nothing about cryptocurrency, and you just have some blind faith trust, and you take all of your life savings, $200,000, and you put it into crypto, and then all of a sudden the value of the coin drops by 2/3. Can you live with that downside? If it's your life savings, the chances are, I'm going to assume that would crush you emotionally. And what's the potential upside? Yeah, you could probably 10x your money, right? Maybe 100x. I don't know, over the next decade. But for a lot of people, they make decisions without asking themselves, what's the potential real downside? And if I can't live with that, should you do it just because the upside is so big? So, it sounds crazy, but as an entrepreneur, I don't take as much risk as I used to. I used to be way more risky, but now it's almost like I'm looking for these asymmetrical reward scenarios where the downside I can mitigate and the upside is disproportionate. It's geometrically, opposed to the potential downside. Like, there's so much upside of, my world today with high speed ventures is buying companies. The amount of upside potential versus the downside, I buy a company, doesn't work out the way I want it to, potentially I divest of it, get my money back, mitigate it, no harm, no foul, versus the upside of 25, 50xing the investment or the acquisition through that period of time. And I think the upside downside evaluation is such a great way to make a decision quickly. And then finally, the third thing is, I think for a lot of people that know they have anxiety around recruiting, around financial investments, around, make even just like software decisions, like what products to buy, I think it's better for you to build a system, almost like a decision tree. Like, if this, then go to this. Like, you could write down a system, like, for recruiting, you might have a process like I have, which is called the talent pipeline that I teach my coaching clients, which would be like, okay, the video gets submitted, you evaluate these things, these are the questions you ask, then you go to a cognitive assessment, you go to, profile assessment, you go to a test project, and there's always 3 candidates before you hire somebody. That's kind of like high level part of my recruiting process. Well, now, if you've got that, if you delegate, you move the decision off your plate through a process. So even an investment decision, a lot of investors that trade options or day trading or angel investment or buying companies like me, I have a decision criteria list. So I can give that to somebody else. They can move processes through forward faster, make decisions on my behalf. I'm not involved. But they're not bringing any emotion to it because they're just following a process. And I think that is such a powerful way that if you're self-aware enough to know that certain things trigger you and it's better if somebody else handles it, but in doing the delegation, you give them a process, it can help you really move things along faster. So those are the 3 big ideas that I want to share with you. Number 1, remember that fear is nothing but false evidence appearing real. Number 2, to measure the upside and the downside potential of making a decision. And if you can't live with the downside, don't make the decision. And number 3, always look at opportunities to move decision-making off your plate through a process, that an individual, a contractor, an agency, so that the business can continue to grow, regardless if you have emotional triggers being fired around decisions you need to make.